Okay, so imagine a place where millions of people hang out every single day. They play, they build stuff, they socialize. Now, what if that entire world just vanished overnight with absolutely no warning? Well, for tons of young people in Egypt, that wasn't just some hypothetical. It's exactly what happened when their access to the huge online universe of Roblox was suddenly just cut off.
You see, for these users, Roblox wasn't just some game. It was everything. It was like their digital playground, their after-school club, and a giant creative canvas all rolled into one. It's a platform where you can build literally anything, be anyone, and just connect with your friends in all these different worlds. For a lot of them, logging on was as normal and as important as checking their texts.
And then, just like that, it was gone. In February of 2026, players all over Egypt tried to log on, but all they got were error messages and connection failures. Their entire online universe had disappeared, and it left behind this huge wave of confusion. So, what was going on? Was it a server crash? Some kind of technical bug? Well, the answer turned out to be way more final than that.
Yeah, this was no accident. This was a deliberate, top-down decision. The news dropped from Egypt's Supreme Council for Media Regulation, or the SCMR. They announced a full nationwide ban on the entire platform, and it was effective immediately. The digital world that was there 1 minute was now officially off limits by government order.
So, how does a ban like this even happen technically? Well, it takes two main players. First, you've got the SCMR. They're the ones who made the big policy decision to pull the plug. Then the NTRA, that's Egypt's telecom authority. They handle the dirty work, getting all the internet providers across the country to actually enforce the block. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? What were the official reasons for taking such an incredibly popular platform completely offline? Well, the Egyptian authorities laid out a whole list of concerns, and they all really centered on child safety. They pointed to the risk of kids being exposed to inappropriate content, the dangers of unmoderated chats with strangers, and they talked about wanting to protect moral and educational values. They also brought up the potential psychological risks of too much gaming and, the financial stress that those in-game purchases can put on families. And it seems like this feeling came straight from the top. Right before the ban, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi actually brought up how other countries were starting to limit kids' screen time. It was a pretty clear signal that making new rules for digital platforms was about to become a national priority. To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to understand just how massive Roblox is. We are talking about a platform with over 80 million users around the globe. That reach is absolutely insane, which is exactly why it makes regulators so nervous. And here is the number that really gets their attention. Just look at the user demographics. A whopping 40% of the entire user base is under the age of 13. That's tens of millions of kids. And for Egyptian regulators, that single fact was a huge part of their decision. Right, so this ban didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was really the peak of a much bigger conversation that was happening inside Egypt, one that put the country at a sort of digital crossroads. For months leading up to this, Egypt's parliament had been debating the dangers of social media and online games for children. There was this real political push to get stricter rules in place, things like age verification and making tech companies more accountable for what happens on their platforms. And it wasn't just politicians either. Public opinion was being shaped by pop culture. There was this really popular TV show that was all about the risks of gaming addiction and what it does to families. That kind of brought the whole issue out of the government buildings and right into people's living rooms, making it feel way more personal and urgent. So, if we zoom out even further, you start to see that what Egypt did, well, it's actually part of a much bigger global trend. I mean, just look at this. From China to Turkey to Iraq, governments all over the world are trying to figure out how to handle Roblox. The exact reasons might be a little different. One might cite national content rules, another child safety, but the pattern is totally clear. More and more countries are stepping in to restrict or just ban the platform outright. And hey, this isn't just a Roblox thing either. It's part of this much wider international movement. You have countries like Australia and France that have already started banning social media for kids under a certain age. The big question that governments everywhere are wrestling with is whose job is it to protect kids online? So where does this all lead? What happens now? The platform is offline, for sure, but this story is far from over. Well, for their part, Roblox isn't just sitting back silently.
The company has confirmed that they've reached out to Egyptian authorities to try and start a conversation. They're basically offering to talk, highlighting their safety features and pointing out that they've worked with other governments before to find solutions that work for everyone. All of this leaves parents, the very group this whole thing is supposed to help, pretty divided. On one side, you have supporters who think the ban is a necessary shield. They see a digital world that's just too big to police effectively. But on the other side, you have critics who worry that by shutting down a popular, well-known platform, they're just pushing their kids into darker, harder-to-monitor corners of the internet.
And that really leaves us with the huge unanswered question at the heart of this entire debate. When you ban a digital world like Roblox, do you actually make the playground safer? Or do you just end up building higher walls around a risk that has simply moved down the street to a place that's much harder to see?